Hey everyone, this is Rob with another REVIT electrical video. I've been asked by a number of people to show how I created the symbols that we use on our one-line or single-line diagrams. So today we're going to show how that's done, how we create these annotative symbols that do not come with the REVIT out of the box. So let's get right into it. So here we are in our REVIT tutorial project. And this is the one-line, single-line diagram that we've put together so far. It's just a start of one. But it shows, a lot of the symbols that we use. And, REVIT out of the box does not come with any symbols like this for use on a single-line diagram. So we've had to create them ourselves. Now, some people offer packages that you can buy, and if that's the way you want to go, go for it. For ours, we had specific looks and specific symbols that we wanted, so we went ahead and did them. And we like to have kind of control of our own look and how they work. So this is like I say, a single line diagram. I've also got one called one line diagram pieces that I put in our project template for our users to start with so that they don't have to drag and drop or bring in all of these symbols. They're already here and they can be moved around. You can right click, say create similar, and then pop over to your one-line diagram and put it in there. So this will show some of the symbols that we're going to be going through. Today I am just going to do the first simple one really. There's no arcs, there's no circles, but look at this panel. A panel symbol is simply a rectangle with some text, or in our case text and a label, because this here label I can change this to panel, panel P1 if I want. And so it is very simple. We will start with this, and if we get enough interest, I will go ahead and show how we do others, clear up to things like this generator. We've got breaker symbols, we've got transfer switch symbols, and things like that. So we can get as complicated as we want. Now, of course, you could just draw lines and circles, kind of like the old CAD days, or back then, of course, we used blocks. This is similar, but it's best to have a whole set of annotative symbols that you can drag onto a drafting view and create your single line, one line diagram. So let's get into how we do this. So let's get right into this. We're going to start a new family. Now, you have a number of family templates, and if you've made families before, created your own, you're familiar with this. If not, there's a number of templates that come with REVIT, and for all kinds of things. You can have generic models, you can have furniture, electrical fixtures, things like that. We are going to, in this case, create an annotation. It will be a dumb symbol. It won't have any data contained in it. It is simply just a drafting view type of symbol. So under annotations, let's go down and find a generic annotation. You could also do things like tags if you're tagging wiring or other equipment, things like that. We're going to make a generic annotation. So just open that. And it gives you a little hint here. You have to change the family category to set the appropriate annotative type. The insert point is at the intersection of these two reference planes. So if you're not familiar, these are just, I call them construction lines. These are lines you can use to help align what you're drawing, and you will know where the center point is. These do not show up in the final family when you put it into your model. And delete this note before using it. So of course we'll do that. So this change family category part means that we could change this from a generic annotation to something else. We can start with this generic annotation, but change it. So over here in the top left, you have a number of properties buttons. This one's family types. The one at the top is called family category and parameters. If you go there, you can see that there's a number of different kinds of family categories you can set this to. Right now, this is grayed out or grayed in as a generic annotation. You can change it to a model tag. You can change it to all kinds of things. This video will just be dealing with generic annotation. But even if you didn't start with the tag family template, you can change it in here. So that's just what that means. So we're going to leave it as a generic annotation as it shows here on the right. So let us get rid of our note and let's start. Now, one thing you want to think about is what size do you want this symbol to appear at when you print it onto your PDF, or if you eventually print it onto paper, how physically large do you want it? Do you want this panel to just be a tiny little, 1/2-inch rectangle? Or do you want it to be maybe an inch wide by 1.5 inches tall? Think of if you've been printing out your blueprints before, what size do you want that? So for our panels on our one-line, for our panel symbols on one-line diagrams, we go with a 3/4 inch tall by 1/2 inch wide actual symbol. And that appears to be a good size to fit a number of panels onto a single line diagram. So we will keep that in mind. Now, because this is just going to be a symbol, we are not going to need to have parameters that are changeable in the model. We don't really need a bunch of extra construction lines, reference planes, things like that with dimensions and associated parameters and complicated things like that. We just simply need a symbol that's the right size right from the very beginning. So let us just create, top left, create, and we are going to create just a simple line. Now there's only a certain number of lines available within annotations, and up here under the subcategory of lines, we have generic annotations or invisible lines. That's all you get. Now you can create additional line types if you want. Sometimes in a family, an actual maybe, for example, a panelboard, we may want some red dashed lines to indicate clearance lines or things of that nature. So we can create those in this family if we want to. For our purposes, again, this is simply a generic annotative line. It's very simple. So that's why I started with this symbol. So we just want to draw our symbol, and we want it 1/2 inch wide by 3/4 inches tall. Now we can do a bunch of reference lines, reference planes, dimension them, and things like that. But that's a little more complex than we need because we are not going to be changing those dimensions in our final one-line diagram model. So this will be simply just draw it to the size we want it. So hit line. And I want it centered, so what I'll do is I'll start at the center and work my way to the right and 1/4 inch. And then I want to extend this to 1/2 inch. And depending how far zoomed in is how precise this gets. I'm down to 256th of an inch. If I zoom out, I'll have less of that. So it should pop into 1/2 inch. There we go, 1/2 inch. Now let's do another simple, create another line. And this time we want to go up 3/4 of an inch. There. And then we can copy these, copy command. And they will kind of snap to where you want them. Simple as that. There is our panel rectangle. And I've got the bottom as the insertion point. You can make the top the insertion point. It really doesn't matter once it's in the final diagram. It can be moved around and wherever you want. So it's just up to you. I do a lot of multi-story projects, so my one-line diagrams, single-line diagrams tend to start at the bottom, work their way up. So a lot of feeders come up into the bottom of the panel. Again, it's really whatever you want to do. It doesn't really matter. Now we want to put in some text and the labels. So up here, there's a little A, that's the text command. And the default on the right is 3/32 inch text, which works for our symbols. So let's do that. Now up here in the center, you have alignment for this text. Right now it is top down and it's left justified. So up here it's top aligned and left justified. Now for this panel, we would like it to be centered left and right. So we can do top align is fine, but let's go align center. So those are your two alignments. So now if we pick a center spot, which is just close to here, and we can type in, and we use all caps on our diagram, so you can type in the word panel, click out of there, and it centers it for you. And then that's just text. So now we want to create an editable label in this so that we can change the name in our single line diagram. So up here under create, over here under text, you see there's text like we had before, and then there's a thing called a label. So click on label. You have the same kind of controls. So we have top aligned and then align center. So let's align the center right at the top, right there. And then if you don't see something called panel or something, you create it. So let me get rid of this to show you how this is done. So what you do is you go down to create, and then we're going to create a parameter. And let's just call this panel name. And we want it to be an instance type variable, which means that each separate copy of this panel in our single line, one line diagram will be different. It's not a type parameter. So it's under common, it's going to be a text, and it can group it under the text grouping within that family when you look at the parameters. So there we go. It's a family parameter, panel name, it's instance, text, okay. And then we want to add that parameter to our label, panel name, and we can give a prefix, suffix, all that kind of thing. We're fine with just nothing. And then the sample value would be just, let's do something like a 2A or P1 or whatever you want to call it. So that kind of gives an example of what that label is going to be, but it's actually a label that can be changed. So that is it. I mean, it's very simple. When we get to other panels, we can have a main circuit breaker shown up here. You know, there's all kinds of things we can do, but this is a very, very simple symbol to start with. So let's go ahead and save this. File, save as. Save it as a family. And I've already saved it, but I called it one line panel MLO because it's main lug type of panel. There's no circuit breaker, main circuit breaker. And make sure you have options of just one, so you don't, unless you want a bunch of backups. Save that. And then I can get out of this and try to bring it into my family, or I can simply say load it into my project. And if I already had one in here, that's okay. So now I've got it in here. And if I was to go into my single line diagram, and now let me find my family that I brought in, and it should be under annotative symbols, and it'll just be, I didn't label it like I would normally with a company name, things like that, but there it is, one line panel, drag it in, and there it is. Let's go to panel 1B and see how we did. So, as simple as that. This is just a symbol, and it's editable, and it's as easy as that. We can connect lines to it. It even snaps kind of to the center of it if you want to do that. So that really is all there is to it. And we will cover some of these other symbols that are more complicated in the future. But this is the basics of symbols for one-line diagrams. And it's really not that hard to create. So, you know, whatever symbols you need, there you go. It's a generic annotation. So hopefully you got something out of this and learned something. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button. Thank you very much. And until the next one, goodbye.